Hey guys, and welcome to Unit 3, Part 4 of Sensation and Perception. Hope you guys enjoy this video. This is one of the cool ones where we start looking at information and kind of putting it into different categories. And we're going to be looking at how we see shapes, depth, motion, constancy, and how we organize that in our brain. So first off, one of the things that we look at is contour. And we're looking at location at which a sudden change of brightness might occur. So this gives you your contrast. We're also going to look at figure-ground relationship. And this is a principle that kind of looks at what stands out and what is left over. So a really good example is text on a page or even text on this screen. The text is the figure, and the screen or the page is the ground. It's in the background. It's not really what you're focusing on. And with these, we also have our Gestalt principles. And with those Gestalt principles is Gestalt psychology, which is the school of thought interested in how people naturally organize their perceptions according to certain patterns. And some of these are things that make sense. Some of them are things that you might start thinking about how you organize your room or how you look at different information or start looking at things around you and be like, oh, wow, maybe this is why I see this. So our first example is closure. So these could be disconnected or incomplete figures, and we fill in those spaces to make them complete. So if you look at your examples on the bottom, you have a orange shape and there's something missing out of it. Pretty sure you're not missing a heart. No. It makes a triangle. Again with a square. And then, even though there's a lot missing out of that last part on the right, you could still tell it's a horse. Proximity. Objects near each other. We see them as a unit. So instead of looking at this as 16 different squares, if I were to have you describe this first off, you might say, oh, I see 4 different columns of equally sized squares. Similarity. Objects that are similar, we group together, and we see those as units. So you guys either see these as columns of circles and squares on the left, or rows of circles and squares on the right. Continuity explains how our brain experiences visual line of elements that are grouped together. So for example, in the image below, your eye kind of wants to follow the curves and creates that image that it's a dog or a Dalmatian specifically. Law of Pragnance. This is when people are presented with a set of ambiguous elements. We can interpret them in different ways. But we look at them in the most simplistic way first. So if you just close your eyes and open them just barely so you're squinting, all you can really see is a tree. But then if you open your eyes fully, you guys see that this is so much more. You see the animals, the fish at the bottom with the water. It's a pretty cool image. Then we have our depth perception. Depth perception is the ability to perceive objects three-dimensionally. And this is using both binocular and monocular cues. Binocular cues are depth cues that depend on the combination of the images in the left and right eyes and how they work together. One of those ways is by convergence, and this helps cue depth and distance in muscle movements. so that we can focus on something, but if we were to bring it up close to our face, it might make our eyes cross. And disparity, the difference between the image and the two eyes to determine the depth or distance of the object. So if you guys focus on something with your right eye and close your left, and then flip-flop and close your right, the image almost jumps. This is to help get the difference, to help determine disparity. Next are our monocular cues, and these are powerful depth cues available from the image in one eye, and it's either the right or the left. So familiar size, height in the field of view, linear perspectives and relative size, overlap, shading, and texture gradient. So here's just a picture from the book that shows some shading and texture gradient and some linear cues. This is a better example of linear perspective and height and field. It almost looks like it's moving if you stare at it long enough. And motion perception, this is one of the fun ones with sensation perception. First, we have to use neurons that are specialized to detect motion. So feedback forms in our body and tells us whether we are moving or whether something else is moving. And this is more from a safety standpoint. The environment where we see is rich with cues that gives us the information about movement. But apparent movement is where you have stationary objects, but it looks like they're moving. And you may have seen some optical illusions that fit that example. Perceptual constancy is a recognition that objects are constant and unchanging, even though sensory input in them is changing. So it can be the size, shape, or color. And this is just to show that we do demonstrate and interpret sensation. And you can see this with different doors, or if you take like a little kid piece of a train track that are the same exact size, if you lay them on the floor and put one right above the other one, they look to be different sizes. And here's just an example of visual perception of motion. And if you stare at the circle in the middle for 30 seconds to a minute, you will start to look like you're going in a tunnel. It's a little trippy. Blink a few times and look at a wall behind you or in front of you, and it should help you unfocus. Hope you guys have a great day, and see you soon.